there's no politician who lives in the city and whose political future really depends only on whether they deliver for the citizens of the city.
Wow.
What we are confronting in Bangalore is really a tragedy of the commons. I'd say if you invest massively and meaningfully in walkability, you will address clean air, you will address public health, you will address traffic congestion, you will ensure that more and more people are able to take public transport, you will ensure that more and more women, particularly urban poor women, are able to access work.
Two founders walking together. With Satish Manchikanti and Ajit Sivram. Execution is not a hustle. When you grow people, you grow everything. Two founders walking together.
Hi Srikanth.
Hi, Ajit.
In leading Janaagraha, and just you have spent almost a decade and a bit studying Indian cities, understanding cities deeply, how they're led, how they're governed. Still, Indian cities feel quite chaotic, right? You go, especially for someone not from India, or even for us when we travel. What's happening with our cities today?
It's a great question. If you really cut through all the clutter and you then say you want to put your finger on one thing, I'd actually say there's no politician who lives in the city and whose political future really depends only on whether they deliver for the citizens of the city.
Wow.
Love that. Yeah.
It just boils down to that.
So it's a leadership piece there. Yeah.
It is political ownership.
I love how you got right to the point. But just rolling back, just as a citizen, right? When I look at the cities, I understand there's so much is riding on the cities. Your statistics say that 60% of the GDP comes from the cities, right? 70% of the new jobs by 2030 are going to be created in cities.
Yes.
But when you look at our big ones, there's literally every city has one fatal issue, right? And that is what I gravitate towards. When you think of Delhi, like, oh my God, the air pollution. Mumbai, it's the informal housing, which is like 50% of it. Bangalore, obviously, is traffic that, I don't want to get out of the house because, like, hey, when I say Bangalore is broken, the first thing that comes to my mind is traffic. And if you ask me as a citizen, I say, okay, let's fix the traffic. But I know from what I've heard from you, that's obviously a very superficial way of looking at what the problem is. So as citizens, if we have to fundamentally understand how cities are run and what's wrong with it, how would you explain that?
If I can first respond to our angst about the large cities in India, I think first we have to concede that they are actually working for millions of people, because there's something about the city and the opportunities that it provides for growth. It could be a high-paying job or a higher-paying job. It could be my ability to come as a single migrant and support my family back home. It could be better education opportunities, medical opportunities, recreation, etc. It's really working for millions of people, and that's why they have all become beehives for millions of our fellow citizens. But
like that.
Clearly at some point, the city stops keeping pace with the growth. And that's really when things start breaking down. And in the case of cities like Bangalore and Gurugram, it happens in a very short period of time because there is a growth spurt that the city goes through. And we are all experiencing that in Bangalore, I guess, decade after decade for the last 2-3 decades. I think what India is really not grasped or figured in through its policy and government systems is that cities are not just a sum of all the infrastructure. A city is not just housing plus transport plus traffic management plus water supply plus drainage. And that's how the Indian system, the Indian governments
Sees
at the union and state levels have traditionally seen it. But if you now think about cities as places, they are a combination of neighborhoods. So people live, people learn, people work, people play, recreate.
Sure.
And the city is fundamentally a place where you do all of these. And if you think about cities, therefore, as a sum of neighborhoods, as a sum of places where you live, where you learn, where you work, where you recreate, maybe where you go for health and wellness and so on, then you start to think about it as a system or a network, or I'd say in a softer sense, even a community. And you stop looking at it only through the lens of hard infrastructure.
Interesting. Yeah.
It is a community. The city is a large community.
I love that. And a lot of it is we're not even looking at cities that way, right? Have you seen any examples of other maybe countries where they do look at cities like that?
We've actually begun to believe that pretty much every other country looks at it very differently.
Yeah.
And while there are many other areas where India perhaps does better than our peer economies, but this is one area where we've come to believe through some preliminary conversations, readings that we've done, that pretty much every other country from Indonesia in the east to South Africa in Africa to Brazil and Mexico in the west get significantly better than India.
Nice. So what are they doing differently? Like
So they all treat the city as a place.
Okay.
Their city government has more powers and is more directly accountable to the people. In some ways, people feel greater ownership. They're able to get stuff done much better than we do.
So it's a deep systemic problem then. It's not
It
just
is.
let me give BBMP few more powers and we will sort this out, right?
The Greater Bangalore Authority, now the successor of the BBMP, getting more powers is certainly an important part of the equation. But there are a couple of other pieces as well.
Nice.
But really, it's about imagining cities not just as infrastructure, but primarily as people coming there to live or already being there to live and for livelihoods, for education, for health and wellness, for recreation
And building those out. I've heard you explain cities almost like a combination of, three systems, right? Like you're talking about, like there's planning, there's governance, there's state capacity within which the city exists. Can you break that down for, say, the average person to understand, like, because we see cities very just by our lived experience, right?
Absolutely.
Help us think a little more layered.
So I think the lived experience is really true. The fact that you experience life's challenges quite viscerally, where you live, on the street outside your home, when you get to work or when you get to school, when you're trying to access a neighborhood park or playground or a library, when you're trying to access decent public health care and so on. So that lived experience is real. But really, if you need to address each of them, you don't solve them by solving them. What I mean is, you don't solve for Bangalore's traffic by solving for traffic. But you solve for traffic through better planning, through better design of roads, by making streets more walkable, by making sure that people live close to work, and so on, and through great public transport, etc. Whereas if you try to solve the problem directly, you'll end up widening roads, which is a terrible thing to do, to try and solve for traffic. Or you'll come up with, what you think is an innovation like one-ways or signals that work better through artificial intelligence and so on, which you realize within weeks really don't work and break down. So through our work, what we really discovered as root causes for our lived experiences are threefold. And we call them city systems. So they're really the root causes which underlie our lived experiences as citizens and businesses in the city. And one is planning and design, which is everything to do with the spatial character of the city. That's where solving for cities is different from solving for education or solving for healthcare or solving for transport, because a city is a place. It has a physical character, because you have to decide where people will live, where will businesses come, where will they shop, where will they access education, healthcare, recreation, where will you preserve open spaces and greenery, and so on. Your water bodies, etc. So planning and design has to do with the physical, spatial character of the city. The second really is, who is the political owner? Can you identify a politician who owns development of the city and who is directly accountable to the citizens of the city? So if citizens don't agree with the vision and direction in which the city is going, or with the quality of infrastructure and service delivery, they are able to fire the politician in, say, 5 years and bring in somebody else who is better able to realize their vision for the city. That would be the second one. But there's an added dimension to the second one, which is again unique to our cities and neighborhoods, which is that unlike, say, defense or nuclear policy or foreign policy or national affairs, at the city level, there's no reason why I cannot have direct voice in the manner in which my neighborhood is governed. If I have an empty plot behind this apartment complex, why can't we as citizens get together and have a shared view of whether you want a library there, you want a primary healthcare center there, do you want a park or a playground? Why does it have to be decided by somebody sitting in a municipal office 15 kilometers away? Similarly, if you want to organize a community event and you want to use a particular public space for that purpose, why do I have to get the permission of the police or go, again 20 kilometers away to some government office? So the second piece really is about community ownership and participation. How can people living in a place come together and actively own the place, envision the place, and really work together to realize that vision of a livable neighborhood?
Nice.
That's the second city system.
Sure.
And the third city system is really the hard aspects of saying you need to have enough money, you need to make sure the money is spent well, and you need competent people who are managing your traffic, who are planning your city, who are laying your roads and streets and footpaths, who may be staffing your primary healthcare centers and libraries. You need enough number of competent people in the government system. So that's the city system we call state capacities.
Love it. Yeah. So when you look at the city systems, and I want to kind of zoom in on Bangalore, but let me just set the context there. When you look at the role of Greater Bangalore Authority and how they're going to have an impact, and if you had to take in these three things, if Bangalore has to take one aspect, probably is the most urgent one. But just as a citizen, right? Like Bangalore is in a funny place, according to me, because you talked about how city is a place where you live, you work, you play, right? Those are my priorities. But an average podcast listener is working very hard to kind of make a first world living, right? I live in a gated community where my municipality is outsourced, so I have no issues with electricity, water. I have on-call plumber, electrician, right? I have a place to go for a walk. I have a gym. I have a swimming pool. I can do my squash. And I've got supermarket within, and I've got Swiggy 5 minutes away, right? So my living is taken care of. Then I go to obviously a first world office again. And then I go to my mall, which is again where I do my play or watch movie or whatever, right? So the friction point comes traffic, right? Only thing that's causing me discomfort at a large level is when I go from living to working to playing, right? At a very superficial level, again, I feel like, oh, that is what I want you to fix. But with this deep understanding of city systems and with the whole Greater Bangalore Authority, what do you see as like, hey, Bangalore needs to be like zoning on this one aspect immediately? What would that be?
It's a great question. I'll respond to it in two parts, Satish. Responding to the first piece of the lived reality of a middle class gated community resident. I suspect no more than 2 million people in Bangalore
Absolutely
live in gated communities.
Yeah.
And even 2 million,
1/5
estimate.
1/6.
Yeah. So we don't know for sure, but perhaps Bangalore's population is 13-14 million.
Yeah.
So a little less than 1/5 maybe.
Mm.
But the lived reality is very different
Sure.
for many other people.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
many other people.
Yeah.
My housekeeper, Anjala, for example, lives in a place called Sadharamangala, which is actually, distance-wise is not too far. But she doesn't have access to childcare. She doesn't have a street that is walkable outside her home. She has to wake up at unearthly hours to catch a suburban train, which is a fairly scarce mode of
In Bangalore, yeah.
And then she would get off at Bayapanhalli station. And earlier, when she used to work in Nilgiris in Indiranagar, she would walk 2 kilometers
Yeah.
from there. Again, very unsafe and unwalkable street. And 10-15 years ago, those streets were also quite unsafe. They were not well lit, etc. So the reality of life is very different for the urban poor, for migrants, even for many other middle-class residents of neighborhoods where they may not have gated communities. right?
Absolutely.
If you don't have a gated community, in many parts of Bangalore, you don't have any open space.
Yeah.
And you're finding it difficult to actually go for your morning walk and or breathe clean air. And coming to aspects like clean air, Satish, what we are confronting in Bangalore is really a tragedy of the commons, which is, it is possible, like you said, to exit the public system with respect to housing, with respect to recreation, play spaces, maybe even water supply in your household.
Yeah.
But you refer to traffic. Even clean air is similar to traffic. You can't privately buy clean air.
Yeah.
What about depleting groundwater?
Yeah.
For maybe 10 years, 20 years,
Yeah.
you will
Scary.
drill bore wells
Absolutely.
and you will get water from nearby farms.
Every gated
Because
community is like tankers
Exactly.
non-stop, right?
Groundwater is a common.
Yeah.
Your lakes are commons.
Yeah.
Your open spaces are commons, which means how will you think about our kids growing up in the modern cities, right? Like a Bangalore, Mumbai and so on, the large cities. We all grew up at a time when we had open fields. We could go and play cricket or football or run around or, do fun stuff in your neighborhood. But today it's impossible. You have to go to a faraway decathlon or you find a fairly silly carpeted artificial turf for you to play. These have real consequences on people's lives. And I don't think this really meets any of our dreams or visions.
The life we want to live.
The life we want to live. And which is why you do see outward immigration, even though you may have a first world job, because you don't have a first world life.
Yeah.
People who immigrate don't come back.
Sure.
Or they choose to immigrate.
Yeah.
So that's to the first part. On the second part, as a systems practitioner, it's very hard for me to pick any one thing because we make our living and we live our lives breathing the truth that there's no silver bullet. There are multiple things, which is why we feel there are 3 city systems. But if you still put a gun to my head and ask me, what is the one thing? May not be necessarily urgent. I would go back to the fact that Bangalore still does not have a political owner. Even the minister in charge of Bangalore does not fight his MLA election from Bangalore. He's an MLA from outside of Bangalore.
Wow.
But assume for a moment that you have a Bangalore in charge minister who's from Bangalore. Bangalore has 28 MLAs. He would just be one among the 28. So he's really not, he or she, eventually, hopefully there is a she, is not accountable directly to the citizens of Bangalore. And that is it's in some ways a birth defect. So if there's one thing, GBA does need a directly elected mayor or even an indirectly elected mayor. Directly elected mayor would be good, but if not, even an indirectly elected mayor would be good. But you also said, what is it that Bangalore needs urgently? So if you ask me, what is that one thing that can probably set in motion a lot of other good things? I would in fact say walkability.
Interesting.
Bangalore is really the only city in India where you can walk long distances without breaking a sweat.
Very interesting.
10 months out of 12 months in a year. There's no other city in India which affords you that luxury.
Very true.
Weather.
Yeah.
I remember when my wife and I came house hunting 15 years ago, peak summer, most of India, June, early June. And we were wondering what's going on in the city because we were walking the streets 6-7 hours a day, not breaking a sweat. Today, maybe 2 months a year, the summer is harsh, but you can walk long distances, which means if you make walking safe and possible in all of Bangalore, 15,000 kilometers, close to 15,000 kilometers of streets, if they become walkable, your kids can actually walk safely to their schools. If the schools are nearby, they can walk to their play areas. So also with your elderly parents, grandparents at home, you're able to then, more easily able to access the metro, ride buses. So many possibilities just open up. You're able to take care of your health. There's abundant evidence to show that active mobility solves for both clean air and for public health. And we already are in the middle of a pandemic, I'm told by public health experts, of non-communicable diseases. And walking and running are so important in that. I'd say if you invest massively and meaningfully in walkability, you will address clean air, you will address public health, you will address traffic congestion, you will ensure that more and more people are able to take public transport. Women's participation in the workforce. You will ensure that more and more women, particularly urban poor women, are able to access work.
I fully agree. I never thought of that. I think walking in Bangalore is almost like an extreme sport, right? Like,
Right now, yes. But what we've done, for example, with Tender Sure roads, which is something that we started working on in 2010, our co-founder Swati Ramanathan conceived. Tender Sure, where SURE stands for Specifications on Urban Roads Execution. The idea really was take your underground utilities like power, water, sewerage under the footpath. So agencies don't need to cut the road repeatedly. So put them in pipes or ducts under the footpath. Give inspection chambers on the footpath. So when you want to undertake some repairs or lay new lines, you're able to open up the footpath. And then make footpaths continuous and even. So you spoke about extreme sports. So many times your footpaths, will go up and down because they're not continuous and even. You'll have somebody building a ramp on them, or they'll have steps. Or they'll be made by digging a trench, making it a stormwater drain and covering it with slabs and so on. But we got to design your footpaths well. That's what we've done with Tender Sure roads. Continuous even footpaths which are broad. So you're able to take a wheelchair or a stroller on them. Why are our elderly, differently abled, or even our toddlers not able to enjoy public spaces in a city like Bangalore? So it is possible. We've proven that it's possible to make great footpaths. And we are told by government authorities that 174 kilometers have already been done of tender shored footpaths, and they're planning to do another 650 kilometers, is what I'm told. Yeah.
Love it. We just have to keep the bikers off the footpath.
Srikanth, so I'm half inspired, a little excited, but also quite terrified, right? Like when you explain this utopia of, what a city could be and where Bangalore is, I see miles to go before we sleep. Where are some of the key areas you feel like we're lacking? I think leadership is one you've mentioned. But apart from that, and maybe what's a way to get there?
I think this is very much doable. I don't think Bangalore is in some ways as large. It's not yet as complex, in my mind at least, like a Mumbai or a Delhi.
Yes.
I still think we can retrieve Bangalore if we work systematically. And I do feel we have the soft power, the soft infrastructure with us. So we have the citizenry that is spirited, that cares, that is engaged. And that's reasonably open. It's a city that embraces people from all over the country and to some extent even the world, and somewhat uniquely within the Indian context. And I also feel that you have the economic growth, you have the the spirit of entrepreneurship, of taking on big bold goals and making them happen. That's in the DNA of the city now. 30 years ago, you wouldn't have imagined that Bangalore would accomplish such great things in the world of business, for example.
Yeah.
I think we have that potential to pull off something spectacular in the next 10, 15 years as a city. So that does give me hope. But am I seeing that directionally yet? The answer is no, right? And that's clearly politics and administration. So if you ask me, what are we lacking in? Besides the lack of a political owner, our planning systems are broken. Do we have enough money? Are we spending the money well? The answer is no to both. Do we have enough staff in our city agencies? Do they have the required skills and competencies? The answer is no. Can you fix all of this in 15 years? The answer is yes. You can fix them in 15 years, but you got to start somewhere. And and your starting point cannot just be, again, another civic project. It cannot be a tunnel road or a flyover or another 10 kilometers of metro. That alone will not suffice. Those are important, but that alone will not suffice.
Yeah.
So typically, politicians and bureaucrats have had a preference for projects, and they've always shied away from biting the bullet on governance reforms. And the time for governance reforms is now.
Very true.
That one additional project is not really going to help.
Great. I think that is some hope in the right direction. And I love that in some sense, it's not just one answer, right? It takes all of us. Where Janaagraha started, right, was active citizenship. It was, and I think that's where for us also, it's something very close to our hearts. For us, it's, hey, can the average person, that's why we're called U&I, can the average person get involved, create some change in whatever pains they're seeing in society? It need not be, I want to change India, right? It could be, hey, can I change my neighborhood? You all have done a lot of deep work in this space, right? From handbooks to building communities to actually working with multiple citizen groups. When you think of the citizen, and you call it a citizenship ladder, right? Like when you think of that ladder and you think of the average citizen taking that journey, where do people get stuck? What are some of the challenges that the average Joe faces?
This is one area where Bangalore does relatively well. I think the sense of community in Bangalore, the number of active citizens, the number of civic leaders, people who care is only increasing by the day. And other cities, I can tell you, look up to Bangalore for civic energy, for civic participation and so on. I think, can the average citizen do something in their neighborhood? Absolutely, yes. There are so many things for us to do within our homes and in our community, on our streets, whether it's segregation of garbage, whether it's composting, whether it's not wasting water and power, not paying bribes, standing in queues. There are so many civic behaviors that we can demonstrate in our daily lives. Or even as a community, you can get involved in ensuring that your streets are clean in your neighborhood and so on. And there are many communities in Bangalore doing great work in that direction. Where you really get stuck is when you want to push the envelope beyond that and really ensure that you're able to get parks in your neighborhood, get your parks, maintained well. You want to get a library, public library in your neighborhood, or you want to ensure that, you have walkable footpaths and so on. You then start contending with the city systems, which is, you may not have design standards for footpaths. So the average engineer in the Greater Bangalore Authority area does not know how to lay a good footpath if they don't do a tender show footpath. They may not have funds they'll say, look, I actually don't have enough money to do it, or I don't know how to get that money out of the system. So that's where they tend to get stuck. So in some ways, I do feel that the onus of ensuring that more and more citizens participate is partially on the government. So I, for one, don't buy the argument of civic apathy, for example. I think it's too generic a diagnosis. And I do feel the average Indian citizen in any city in India cares.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you see the need around you, you are at some level going to feel, what can I do about it? There is enthusiasm to help, right? And there are basic things you can do, whether recycling or, water waste or whatever. And then there are other things that are a little bit more complex, and government needs to kind of open up and, invite that in. I think in between those two lie the non-profits, which can actually facilitate that process. Absolutely. How do we sort of become a bridge then? And what does Janaagraha do? What role do they play? And maybe even for the people who don't know enough about Janaagraha, the work you do, can you kind of unfold that for us?
Sure. Again, a great question. Even cities in the West or cities in the global North are discovering that 21st century challenges of climate, public health, gender and equity, social cohesion, and making sure that issues of immigration and race, etc., don't become unmanageable and so on, cannot be solved by governments alone. That realization is there even in cities of the global North, which have in some ways compared to us unlimited capacities and resources. And they are creating new ways of governing themselves, which is not about the government alone, which is about creating a partnership between government, civil society, business, universities, and so on. And so they're creating in some ways that connective tissue, which brings what are seemingly different sectors together. This is even more important in India because, like I said, we may not have the amount of money that we need. We may not have the skills and competencies in government, but that can't stop us from making progress in the right direction. In many of these cases, we have those skills and competencies in the city, may not be in the city government. You have among the world's best professionals in various fields working out of Bangalore. There's no reason why we can't tap into them for solving some of these challenges.
Yeah, sure.
The role really for civil society like U&I and Janaagraha would then be to create platforms where we are able to connect systemic challenges of the government to intent and skills outside of government. And I can't say this is easy. If you ask me, have you done this repeatedly? We've done this. Tend Assure is an example where we brought together a broad-based coalition, civil society, business leaders, industry bodies and governments together to make something happen. But we have to do that at a much larger scale. We have to do this consistently. We have to do this across sectors and geographies within Bangalore. And I'm really excited about that looking ahead to the next 10 years. The last few years, we've not been very active in Bangalore, but we are re-engaging. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can put together these collaborations and partnerships, both at the neighborhood level, but also thematically. I don't see any other way. There's really no other way in which we'll achieve progress. And we have to create that trust between these sectors.
Nice. To actually work together.
Yes.
Yeah. Love that. I think you've been now with Janaagraha a decade and a bit. 15 years, right? And I'm sure it's had its ups and downs. It's when you think of leading Janaagraha, what have been some of the biggest challenges you all have faced as an organization or you personally? And I think what still keeps you up at night and what are you excited about for the future of Janaagraha?
See, the biggest challenge and what keeps you awake at night cannot be different for a non-profit leader in India other than fundraising.
Yeah.
Well, raising adequate funds in the absence of a revenue model is the singular biggest challenge, without a doubt. The what is somewhat complex in a systems change organization is to really measure progress. Because sometimes you can feel like the more I run, the more I'm in the same place.
Absolutely.
So how do you make sure that you're able to zoom out, zoom back in, and ensure that you're actually progressing towards the goal and your shoulders are not drooping. In that sense, you don't feel discouraged that nothing is changing and so on. So that mindset-wise and in terms of keeping yourself motivated, ensuring that you're reconnecting your daily tasks at your desk to the larger purpose. I think that has to become a habit for us to then stay the course in the long term.
Very cool. The leaders and non-profit leaders, especially listening to you, if I have to sum up what you've been trying to explain to us in some way. You're saying, hey, don't try to cure the symptom, right? Try to cure the infection, right?
Yes.
In some way.
Yes.
How would leaders, non-profit leaders, take a step back and have that system thinking and kind of analyze, am I trying to cure the fever or a symptom, or do I really understand the infection? So for someone who's taken that journey, what would be some things you can share with the leaders?
Yeah. So the more I work with government, and I worked with governments now for 15 years, right? Constitutional bodies, union governments, state governments, local governments. I think that the average citizen and civil society in India underestimate the challenge of staffing in governments. We somehow believe that governments have the capability, governments know what to do, and they are perhaps not doing because of inefficiency and corruption. So it's all about corruption, lack of accountability and all that.
True.
But the more I work with government, I'm convinced that state capability is one of the principal challenges of cities, of other challenges that India faces. And governments are also not conceding that. They don't want to be seen as admitting to it.
Sure.
So we are just hiding that under the carpet and pretending as if, we're doing fine. We're not doing fine. So that is actually one of the reasons why civil society will have to get more engaged in systems issues, because the system does not even recognize that it has a problem.
True.
So you'll have to work with the public system to first get them to realize that there is a long-term structural problem, and we'll have to spend some part of our time, even if you're a service delivery NGO, even if you're a NGO that works on delivering direct benefits to communities, maybe 10%, 20% of your time, your mind space has to go in solving for the system. And the easiest way to think about this is, if you stop doing what you're doing, is there somebody else who is tasked with that responsibility? If you stop teaching the kids that you're teaching, if you stop delivering food to the kids that you're delivering, is somebody in government or in the governance system tasked with that responsibility? And will they do that job? And will they do it well? If the answer is no, then you know that you're not fixing the system. If the answer is even if it's a gradual yes, then you know that you're fixing the system. And I don't think we have any other way out in India. And if I were to link this back to the earlier question that you asked, I think as citizens, we have to think beyond the narrative of accountability for services, because we are more than consumers. It's not just about us getting uninterrupted power supply and water supply and somebody else solving it. The state capability problem essentially is that somebody else who in your worldview is supposed to solve it, i.e. the government, is not capable of it. They don't have enough people. They don't have the right skills and competencies. Their laws and policies are not adequately thought out. So unless you engage in it, it's not going to change. So we as citizens will have to think beyond the role of a consumer of government services.
Yeah.
I love that. When you think of citizens as consumers, have you seen good examples of citizens making that transition from consumer to contributor? And could you share a couple of those?
I think there are hundreds of examples in Bangalore. Our resident welfare associations, our communities which have rallied around challenges like, for example, solid waste, etc., are stellar examples who over 5, 10, 15 years have actually made a substantive difference in their areas of work. They could be neighborhood level groups, right? Like the neighborhood I used to live in earlier had an RWA called the BM Kawal RWA. My good friend Sneha Nandihal used to be the RWA president. She assumed that role in her mid-30s, which was something new in the city, because typically you associate RWA presidents with older men. And then eventually they confederated and they became a federation of RWAs in that area called I Change Indranagar. And they've even gone to court on matters of commercialization of neighborhoods, on noise pollution in pubs and parking issues and whatnot. That's one example that comes to mind. And there are several other examples. Another example is on the solid waste management community in Bangalore, the Solid Waste Management Roundtable and groups like Hasrudala, Sahas and others have really been at it for decades now. And they made a substantial difference, working with the system, working with communities, particularly urban poor communities, cracking technical problems, saying how do you make sure that dry waste collection happens properly, how do you make sure dry waste gets processed and does not end up in the landfill, going to courts when necessary.
Wow. I think it's inspiring to hear those stories, because for a lot of us, we don't feel that sort of sense of empowerment, right? And I think it's great to hear those. For you personally, what made you move from well-paying corporate career to then having to worry about fundraising every day for Janaagraha, right? What made you make that change into the social space? Was that
It's that contrast. Satish was talking about us leading first world lives in our bubbles. But when you step out of the bubble,
Yeah.
it's directly, sometimes you experience sub-Saharan
Yeah.
experiences
You
or
build your oasis.
third world. Yeah. But you can't escape that,
Sure.
the brush with the third world, right, in some ways. And that really is a contrast between islands of private prosperity and excellence that we've created, side by side with public squalor. And that's really inequitable and heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
And I feel it's somewhat visceral in a city like Bombay. It used to be, at least. So I worked in Bombay for 6 years. I had a great time professionally, made great friends. The city is great in terms of the community. But I think the contradictions of the city is quite intense. You see India's richest people there. You see highly professional work environments and so on. But you also see outside fine dining restaurants, you'll see 20, 30 people seeking alms. When you land in Bombay, and I'll never forget this, when you land in Bombay,
quite stuck.
you, I remember, I think I for the first time when I went to interview for my job, I think it was the monsoon season. So when you're landing in Bombay, and I was going there after several years, I'd been there as a kid, then I was going there maybe after 20 plus years, you just saw a sea of blue tarps.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For a few minutes, as the plane is landing, you only see a sea of blue tarps. And I was like, I'm coming here to work for an MNC bank, and because I'm fascinated by the banking industry. And then you see this, it really shakes you a bit.
Yeah.
And then you confront that almost every day, because you can't live in the bubble forever. Every day you step out of the bubble. And then you realize that you're actually leading a, in some ways a fake life or a unreal life. So in some ways that really is what made me think. I didn't want to have regrets in my late 40s, early 50s, looking back and saying, okay, all I did was to increase my bank balance and live in a larger home, buy a luxury car, do foreign holidays. And then when you look back at, what purpose or meaning your life had, you realize it was only as a consumer.
Absolutely.
Right? And that was scaring me. So I said, let me just dive in and experiment. I didn't have a home loan. We didn't yet have kids, and my wife was fully supportive. So we said we'll experiment for a couple of years. I loved working with our co-founder, Swati Ramesh. I loved working on systems change in cities.
Yeah.
I stayed.
Yeah. And I love that, right? I think whether you think of the whole consumer mentality, whether you're talking about country or a company, whatever you're part of, being a consumer is you're not going to find contentment out of it, right? At some point, we are wired to be contributors. Right? It's
very well said.
So I think that's an important one. In some ways, we are peers. We've been at it for 15 years. We both also have been.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I think once you've done it for 15 years, we also evolved, right? And how we thought about change and how change happens probably 15 years ago to having done this for 15 years, we understand the reality and what change means. So if you had to give us one insight of what has changed, the way you would have defined change to how you define it, and even theory of change to then and now, what would that be?
Okay, this is deeply personal, but I guess my colleagues in Janaagraha have made it a safe space for me and have been so patient and indulgent with me that this has really struck me in the last couple of years. And I have no compunctions in sharing it. Is really about developing a genuine sense of care and empathy about people around you and treating them respectfully. And the reason I'm saying this is I was trained in a Big Four audit firm and in Mankey. I'm not trying to make an excuse, but just sharing my personal journey. And life was really about performance, about delivery, about proving a point, about professional competence and excellence, about one-upmanship, saying I have to be at the top of my game.
Yeah.
I have to be among the best performers and so on. And that in some ways hardwired me into thinking about tasks, activities, programs, strategy, and not as much about people. And in some ways, this probably affected my personal life as well. But what is really now top of mind for me is how can I become a better person? How can I become a better human being by focusing on developing a genuine sense of empathy and care? Because beyond a point, even when you're managing a large team and organization, it's possible for you to be somewhat antiseptic, somewhat functional and analytical, and not so much emotional and empathetic. And I am going through a 360-degree feedback exercise with the help of a mentor and coach and my internal teams. And it's really, I feel like it's pushing me towards the next phase of my life, where it's not just about getting things done, but it's really about treating people well. So
Thank you for sharing that.
and looking back, I do feel very embarrassed. So I do feel like, I should have lived life differently.
Relatable.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a beautiful insight. I think thank you so much for sharing that, and very, very real also for a lot of us, right? Like just that balance between the people we work with, the relationships we have, and then performance, right? I think we all have that tension, and when we hold those in good tension, like great relationships are better, good work is done.
And really, it really makes you a lot humbler.
Yeah.
Because in your 30s,
Yes.
you're running fast and
Yeah.
you feel good about yourself at the pace at which you're executing and the quality with which you're executing. But later, when people who've been indulgent with you, patient with you, who've been around you, then turn back and give you feedback, it hits home. And then you become much, much more humble.
I think that 40 is a good humbling decade.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't agree more.
Yeah. This has been beautiful. Thank you so much for this. We want to end where we sort of started, right? With cities. If we meet again in a decade or two, what would you say needs to be true to say that India, we got our cities right? What would you say needs to be true for us to get our cities right?
Right. So I was thinking about this, in the picture I have in my mind, the picture that came to mind almost organically is that of a 10-year-old child being able to walk alone on the street and get to their school if their school is in their neighborhood, get to their playground, being able to go to their friend's house or go to the playground or to the neighborhood library and get back home. And if you're able to see this in every neighborhood of Bangalore in 20 years, I think that's the mark of a truly developed city, where you don't really need an adult to accompany the child. You're not worried about safety of the child on a public street because of traffic or stray dogs or what you will, or about crime and so on. And you really don't have to drive your child over long distances to get to school or play.
Love it.
Nice.
That's the picture that I got in mind. That can we do this in 20 years? I think we can.
Yeah, that's a good hope to have.
Yeah, I love it. It's almost describing the India we grew up in. And
That's true. Yeah.
yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. I think this has helped us also as founders understand the world we see around us, especially being Bangaloreans now. And I think it's really given us a deeper insight. Thank you so much, and love your story and love your journey.